There you go. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. It is Monday, March 30th, 2025. We are at Carmel City Hall, and I'm calling this special meeting of the Carmel-by-the-Sea City Council to order at 4:42 p.m. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Sure. Councilmember Barron?
Here.
Councilmember Booter?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Delves?
Here.
Councilmember Jeremoth? Here. Mayor Byrne?
Here.
All are present.
Yeah, I might add that we actually called the meeting to order earlier, about 3:30 when we took a tour, and the tour has taken place. So welcome to all attending today in person and remotely, and thank you for investing your time and attention to help us manage our city. This meeting is conducted in a hybrid format. You can view this meeting and participate with comments on Zoom, or live stream or watch this meeting later on the city's YouTube page if you don't wish to make a public comment. During special city council meetings, and this is a special meeting, public comments are only held for items listed on the agenda. Today we have the consent agenda process and 2 orders of business for which public comment will be accepted after questions from the council. We will then have a closed session for which public comment will be taken prior. We'll first hear comments from those present in person, followed by Zoom participants. While stating your name is optional, it helps us accurately reflect your participation in the meeting minutes. Remote or in-person participants who do not comply with the requirements of the Brown Act will be muted. We will now move to the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are intended to be routine in nature and normally do not require discussion or independent action. However, to make sure that members of the council or the public thoroughly understand and are in favor of each item, anyone may ask that an item be considered individually for purposes of council and public comment. Unless an item is pulled, one motion may be used to adopt all recommended actions. For those of you who want to have a good understanding of what is going on in your city, I highly recommend you do a quick review of the first 3 items of these items every month. I will now read a quick summary of each item. 1. February 27 and March 3rd, 2025 special meeting minutes, and March 4th, 2025 regular meeting minutes. Does anyone want to pull that item? Okay. February 2025 monthly reports. Anyone want to pull that? Okay. February 2025 check. Actually, I want to pull that one. Are you ready? I didn't get a comment from you. You ready? Okay. I'm going to pull that one. February 2025 check register summary. Anyone? Second reading and adoption of ordinance number 2025-001, amending section 1.04.010 and adding sections to chapter 12.36, and that's the camping on public lands ordinance. Anyone? Number 5, adopt resolution 2025-029, granting partial approval of permanent encroachment application for the Salehi project. Anyone? Number 6, adopt resolution 2025-030, approving the appeal by Mary and John Jensen, upholding the Planning Commission's approval of the Track 1 design study and associated coastal development permit, and that was the wood shake roof to a metal roof. Anyone? Number 7, resolution 2025-031, adopting policy 2025-01, social media policy. Seeing none. Number 8, resolution 2025-032, authorizing 1 free use day of the Sunset Cultural Center Theater and lobby for Monterey Symphony's Harmony on the Move benefit overlapping halos. Anyone? And receive and file staff report regarding designation of Mary Wagner as Assistant City Attorney.
I'd like to pull that one.
Okay, I would too. All right, anyone from the public want to pull anything? I'll give you one last chance.
You pulled number 2?
I did, yes. Okay. All right, so if we could, we've got number 2 and number 9 pulled. I'd like to, does someone want to make a motion to approve all the other items?
So I moved to approve the consent agenda items other than item 2 and item 9.
Thank
I'll
you.
second it.
Second, all right. Could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Barron?
Yes.
Councilmember Buder?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Delves?
Yes.
Councilmember Jerema?
Yes.
Mayor Byrne?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, so let's go to number 2. And it wasn't that long ago, but it's the monthly reports. And within that, the one I would like to pull, and Karen, you can tell us which one you wanted to pull. I'd like to pull the reports that talk about the response times, in particular for emergency responders. And I think we've got a presentation to show that. Karen, is that what you were asking? Okay. So I've talked about this at a previous council meeting where I thought at some point it would be good for Paul to explain that. And I know, Karen, you had brought this up at a previous one. And I thought that was pretty interesting because I think in general the public doesn't understand this issue, and Paul does. So I'm going to turn it over to Paul to talk about emergency
That's
response
perfect.
times.
Just roll to there. There, that's perfect. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Yeah, happy to explain this report, which the history on this goes back to when we did our fire merger in 2012, and Council's directive was for accountability of response times is to provide a monthly report to Council to show that we're meeting the requirements of a 95 percentile of all of our calls being under 5 minutes, because that's what we thought we could achieve. So we report on this each month so the public has the ability to see what calls we have and where we go. As you look at it, it's broken down, and this is the fire report. The ambulance one is very similar, but it shows where we went, what type of call we went to, the date and time, and then the most important one is that 4th column over, which is the response time. And that is the number that we use to ensure we're meeting the requirements that Council set in 2012 with this contract of 95% of our calls being 5 minutes or less from call to door. There is a catch to this, though, because those calls aren't necessarily accurate. And I think that's why we're talking about this tonight, because this is the call that when county dispatch gets the call to when the fire department or ambulance arrives on scene. And I have another slide I'd like to pull up just to show this a little bit better. Wow, I need glasses. Are we able to switch this?
So we just have to scroll down, or is
This is a PowerPoint.
Oh.
Carmel has had its own 911 center for as long as I can remember. It developed really because we have our own police, we have our own ambulance, and we have our own fire. In 2012, when we started contracting with Monterey, our fire and ambulance calls go to Monterey County. But if you call 911 in our city, it's going to our dispatch. So we get all police, fire, and medical calls. What we do when we get that call is we take the initial information, including location, and we determine where the call's coming from. Now based on a couple different ways, but we also have a map that we can look at the lot and block, so we can determine if you're 3 southwest of a certain street on the north side. Once we get that information, we transfer the call to Monterey County. Monterey County then connects with the caller and gets the information of the type of call. That is a 2 911 call system. So what the report you're seeing is the Monterey County time. If you add the time of the initial call, which is to our station, you have anywhere from a 45-second to about a 1:30 delay by the time we figure out the address, what's happening, and we relay it to the right dispatcher over in Monterey County. Again, we're the only city in the county with our own 911 center. It's developed over time. Everyone else uses the county. So if you call 911 anywhere else in the county, you're going straight to county dispatch. But we take the calls initially. Does that help with your
That
response?
helps.
The reason One of the reasons we have our own dispatch, again, is because of the address system that we use. Monterey County cannot dispatch to our community because they don't understand our address system. And because they have so many different dispatchers that could potentially be working for the city at any time, they don't have the ability for all those people to understand our system, if that makes sense.
You said the county chief, at the city chief, you meant the county.
The county dispatch cannot handle our calls because of our addressing system.
Okay. So is that your presentation?
That's it? I
Okay.
can take questions.
Could you go back to the original slide? And then what I'd like you to do is just summarize, because I look at these things and I just want to make sure that we really understand what this is saying.
Yeah, if you can zoom in. I'm not sure what it makes sense to me, so I'm
Right.
looking to you for questions as
So
to what doesn't.
When we see a response time in here, is that, if it comes in on a 911 call to us, it could be different than if it goes directly to the county? I mean, so what's
Correct.
the total response time is what I think we need to understand.
We don't have that. And we've been asked that question multiple times by councils, and it's not a number we can accurately provide. Our clock does not sync up with the county dispatch clock, so we don't know exactly what that time is. And yeah.
I'm sorry, so
Go ahead.
Mayor, all the calls you see for EMS or fire are transferred. So they initially come in to our station and then they're transferred to County Com, which dispatches again, fire and the ambulance. If it's a police emergency, then our dispatchers dispatch our police officers.
Okay, so it's a little different.
A little different.
All right, do you have any questions? I know, Alessandra, you pulled this as well.
No, I just.
Oh, okay, number 9, all right.
I had a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Anybody have a question?
So I had reached out to the chief about my neighbor recently, my former neighbor actually recently fell off a ladder, passed away tragically, maybe about a month and a half ago. And so I was digging into this question because there was some question about, hey, folks couldn't find the house, etc. And I guess the question I have for you, Chief, is you're telling us that you can't get the information, but like when I asked this question, you gave me like down to the second, this is when the call came into our dispatch, and this is when county dispatch, said, hey, head out, and this is when they arrived on scene. Like we had all 3 data points, and I was able to figure out exactly how long it was from the initial phone call until and so the first question I have for you is like, is it possible to get isn't it really just the time of the actual 911 call? Like, shouldn't that be pretty easy to get? And then it's just.
I can tell you the time the 911 call came in based on our clock. It's not the same as the county's clock. So when I looked at that report, I looked at, let's say it was 10:19 in the morning. If I look at the information we took, county at the exact same time as the dispatch time, because their clock is off, if that makes sense. They can be off of our clock by a minute or 2. That's why I can't give you that exact time.
Can you give us the time? Do you record the time that you transfer it to the county?
Yes.
So I would say if you have the time that you get the 911 call, and you have the time that you transfer it to the county, and then we can get from the county or we can also get from us the time that the trucks arrive at the home. It feels like between those data points we can piece together what we need to piece together. The other thing that I would say is, and this is not I'm not I'm not trying to go against you. I'm just trying to like provide some light, because this is one instance that was personal to me that I was just curious about what the situation was, and it didn't take a minute. It took 2 minutes and 55 seconds on that first leg of the 911 call before it got transferred to the county.
Yep. It takes time. But let me add to that too, because you brought up a good call and a very important call, because the address that was provided by the caller put us on a dead end, and we couldn't get to that house because they provided us an address that didn't go through. They actually provided the wrong address of where the incident took place, because not everybody understands the address system. We've created the address system, but people create their own sometimes. They think they're at a different location. And especially if you have people, and I'm sharing this because it's important, when people come here and stay, maybe they're renting a home, they don't know the address, and so they guess. And that makes it a little bit more challenging to find an address.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, I was going to comment. I think Hans has his own story about not knowing what his own address was right when he moved into town. So when the caller called and gave you the wrong address, was that ferreted out here, or was that ferreted out when it got to Salinas?
It was ferreted out when
the
we
ambulance
arrived on
was on.
scene, and we were looking for the right house.
And so they arrived. The ambulance arrived at a dead end. The ambulance did what they were told, which was go to the bad address, and they arrived at a dead end. So Hans, you said it took 4 minutes and 55 seconds or whatever it was, and so
2 minutes, 55 seconds for the first part of the 911 call.
Yeah.
so the wrong address affected the response time. The time that when that incident showed up on this chart that we have on the screen, that bad address would have affected that number.
Not necessarily, because if they hit responded and they got to that location and hit before they hop out of the bus, they hit arrived on scene, and then they hop out and they're like, oh shoot, we're in the wrong area. Then they have to get back. They can't put themselves back in service and then go back and say, here we are again. So again, these are as close as we can get to accurate, but they're not 100% accurate.
One thing I would just say is if there is a way that you guys could just document for all these calls when the 911 call comes in, and then when you transfer it over to the county, and if we could just like kind of layer that into the report, I think that would be helpful.
Do you have that ability, Chief? Because, I mean, this comes from a database. What's this called? Firehouse or something like that? Firewatch, something?
Yeah, we don't have access. Monterey provides this data for us.
But do you have a similar database to address what Mr. Booter
We don't
said?
have Firehouse, but I would have to pull up every single call and look at that call as it came through.
So we don't have a database that logs all of them in this kind of a list form?
No, we don't. It would take a lot of time to do that. A lot of time.
Is there any way that we could just look at it over a certain amount of time and put some staff time on it just to get a sense of what is the average over a 4-month, 5-month period?
How did you come up with the 45-second to a minute and a half? Was that an average? Did you do a sampling?
Average. Yeah, you looked at about a dozen or 20 different calls and just saw what the average was.
My only question, because I get it, it's hard because this is your system and this is their system, and there's no common identifier. There's not like a phone number ID or.
Correct.
That's obvious. How do we know if, for example, in the case of the ambulance, if it's our ambulance versus another ambulance? Or is this just our ambulance?
This is just our ambulance. If it's going, I can get a hold of AMR, who's the county provider, and get that data. I've done that before, and I used to include that on the reports, how many times AMR was coming in and what the times were.
That'd be really, because that's another one, right? Is this report was really created as a measurement, a metric tool for our contract with Monterey. It wasn't really created to understand full response times. It's the part of the response time which they can have control over. Yeah. And if we take a minute or two up front to get it to them, that adds to it, is what I'm hearing. But also, if AMR or even Monterey has to send an ambulance from somewhere else, that could be quite long, and we don't know it.
Right.
And I think it'd be very interesting to know what is the response time cost of not having our ambulance ready to go, or busy.
Yeah, busy. Yeah.
Right. Any other questions? I'm going to take this out to the public. You might want to stay there.
Yeah.
Stay close, please.
Stay close.
I'm going to take this out to the public for public comments, please. Hi, Karen.
Hi. Karen Ferlito, thank you for what you do. I know how hard you work because I did it for 4 years. And, recently a friend of mine the couple were in another person's house having hors d'oeuvres, and all of a sudden the woman started to slump over onto her husband, and they thought, oh my gosh, maybe she's having a stroke. He couldn't make the phone call, so my friend picked up the phone, called 911. The other part of the couple went out into the street to look for the emergency service to come when it was going to be, so that there wouldn't be any confusion. And while he was on the phone to Monterey, the person thought that Santa Rita ran east and west instead of north and south, and they had to go through an explanation of which direction Santa Rita went and then how many houses off it was. When there's an emergency and someone could be stroking out and every minute counts, it would be so much easier to say 123 Main Street. Boom. The other question I have while the chief is here, I thought at one time you mentioned if we had standardized addresses, the response, the dispatching could be different. Is that so? Or would it still all dispatch to our service?
Go ahead.
I mean, in
we're
other words,
obviously-
if we had standard addresses and it went through 911 directly to Monterey County, and we gave an address and they could dispatch immediately, it wouldn't have to ricochet. Is that something? Anyway, I am a proponent of not just trying to get into the weeds, so to speak, and say everything is just fine. Realize we have a jerry-rigged reporting system that is not accurate and could be very costly to someone who is having a stroke or an emergency. And the fact that we don't always know, like Chief said, that they even get to the correct, and then we don't have any real accounting of that. And that third thing, Council Member Delves, that you ask is very important. When Aramark comes in, do they know where we are? So this is an important thing to talk about.
All right, thank you, Karen. Any other public comments on this subject? Seeing none, I'm going to bring it back. Is there any other conversation? That was really sort of information only, and it was pretty interesting information, I thought. And I appreciate your instruction. I prefer not to. I want to keep it to what was the consent item, and that's why I pulled it, and I think why you pulled it too. And I think we have a better understanding of that. So I'm going to move to the second item that we pulled, which is item number 9. And while it isn't widely known, we actually have 2 city attorneys. The city retains the law firm of Burke, Williams, and Sorensen for city attorney services. Brian Pierick is our city attorney, sitting next to me, and Samantha Zutler is our assistant city attorney. Over the past 6 years, Samantha's workload has increased, including being city attorney for Healdsburg, Capitola, and Watsonville, and she no longer has time to assist Brian. We are fortunate that another highly experienced attorney at Burke is available to provide services to Carmel, and I'm going to let Brian introduce her at this time.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Yes, I would like to introduce Mary Wagner. She's here today and certainly can step forward and respond to any questions you may have. We did attach her resume to the agenda packet, and Mary was the city attorney for the city of Sausalito for 20 years. She has experience in many areas of municipal law, land use, housing, real estate, and others. Currently, Mary is serving as the assistant city attorney for the cities of Benicia and Menlo Park. She also does work with many of our other cities. She's also very conversant in all of the laws relating to representing cities, including the conflict of interest laws and Brown Act, on which she has made presentations. She graduated summa cum laude from, magna cum laude from the University of California Hastings College of Law. So, Mary, would you like to step forward in case the council has any questions for you?
And if I may, Mary Wagner, as you know, I'm very happy to be here tonight, and I look forward to working with all of you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have for me.
Mayor, I had a couple of questions, either for Mary or for Brian. And this is things that I want to know and things that the public wants to know. So this is just more about like the whole process. I've got 4 of them. I could just read them all and then we can get the answers. So one is, does the city council choose the assistant city attorney, or we just approve who is chosen for us by the city attorney? Number 2 is, what are the job duties? For example, do you just fill in when the regular city attorney is not available, or are there other functions that you have? Number 3 is, how much is the city paying in addition for the assistant city attorney? And then number 4 is, do we need an assistant city attorney? So thank you.
I'm sorry, I missed the 4th one.
Do we need one? Is there a need?
Oh, do we need,
an
okay.
assistant?
Well, that probably should have been the first one. Okay. So I'll answer them in the order that you presented them. The answer on the first question is whether the city council chooses or the city attorney. Under the contract that we have with the city, the firm, Burke, has the authority to make the designation. However, in the interest of complete transparency, I didn't want to just send you all an email saying, guess what, you got a new assistant city attorney. So I wrote it up, presented it so that the council could review it and discuss it and be fully aware of what Mary's background would be. And so that's the answer to the first question, and certainly looking for your input on that one. In terms of job duties, would Mary just fill in when I would not be available? No, Mary would do more than that. As the assistant city attorney, probably the best analogy I might give you is that you have Chip Rearig as your city administrator and Brandon Swanson as your assistant city administrator. So Mary would serve in a very similar fashion in basically helping to assist the city on the many issues that you have. And you all know we have a lot of issues and got a lot of late meetings as a result of that. So Mary can help us on, because of her broad background and experience, would be able to assist us with that. And the third question was, would there be any additional expense? And the answer is no, because the work has to be done. Either I do the work or Mary would do the work. So it's not that we are both doing it at the same time. She would be able to assist, similar to the relationship that Chip and Brandon have, and where Brandon gets requested by Chip to help him on certain matters. And the fourth point is, do we need an assistant city attorney? The answer is yes. The reason primarily is because of the fact, as the mayor mentioned, the assistant that we did have, Sam Zutler, over those years has now become a city attorney for 3 cities, and she just doesn't have the time to devote to this. When I told Mary about this opportunity, she was very excited about the opportunity to work for the city of Carmel. She has, in fact, done some work for the city on the housing element in consultation with Brandon and his the community development staff. So she's already familiar with that. And you've still got a ways to go on your housing element, right? There's potential amendments to that. And Mary has fingertip knowledge of all those rules. So I think she'd be a very valuable asset to the city.
All right, thanks. So this is all part of our original contract with your company when we hired you?
Yes.
In a nutshell. Perfect. Thanks for your answers.
Sure. So this is a receive and file, but if there's more questions for me or you have questions for Mary, she's available.
Welcome. Glad to have you.
Thank you.
Great resume.
Thank you.
Do you have anything to add to that discussion that we just had?
I don't, other than I agree 100% with what Brian said, and I'm really looking forward to working with the city, with you all, and with your staff. I do other work in the county, and so I'm familiar with some of the issues that face you and that face every city in California. Although they're always a little bit unique, right? They're the same, but they have a different twist depending upon where you are. So happy to be here. Looking forward to working more with Brian and with all of you.
As we are. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do you want a motion to approve the rest of the consent agenda?
I would like that, yes.
I move.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry.
Nancy Toomey.
Yes.
Welcome, Mary. So I support what you're doing here. I have 2 things that may or may not fit the scope of how you choose to use your legal services. One is I'm anxious to have a better path to work with our legal counsel with regard to all of the stuff. You could use a different S word there that comes from our Sacramento legislators to get in front of certain things that might impact us significantly. So that's just a request, but obviously your decision. The other is to continue to work with our legal staff, per your guidance, on what you see being done in other cities, because we can learn from them. No point in reinventing the wheel unless we need to for our unique requirements. So look forward to more of that kind of thing coming from our legal team. Thank you.
Right. Nancy, you might want to, when we talk about adding agenda items, which we'll do tomorrow, at some point in the meeting, you might want to bring that up as a potential discussion item for the council.
All right.
All right. Thank you, Nancy.
Great,
appreciate it. Okay, Bob, now do your
Move
thing.
to approve the consent agenda items number 2 and 9.
I'll second it.
All right. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Barron?
Yes.
Councilmember Buder?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Delves?
Yes.
Councilmember Dramov?
Yes.
Mayor Byrne?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Nice discussions. Now we'll move on to the orders of business part of our agenda that requires city council discussion, debate, direction to staff, and/or action. We have 2 items tonight. The first item is number 10 on the agenda. Discuss city policy C89-02, city council meetings, orders of council, agenda packets, minutes of meeting, and agenda distribution, and provide direction to the city administrator. I'm going to do a brief introduction, and then Chip, Brian, and I will lead a discussion with the council and the public. Tonight we'll be allowing for public comment after council's questions. We will have a discussion with council and then allow additional questions from the public before our final discussion and recommendations to staff. So you get 2 shots at us tonight. I encourage your involvement in this important process to make our public meetings as effective and short as possible. Since we have a limited number of folks here tonight, I encourage anyone listening to this at a later time to provide your thoughts in writing to the city clerk or to us at future meetings so we can include your ideas. In other words, we are not going to finalize anything here tonight. This is to give some direction to staff, but even then, all of us will be able to include more items, and we'll bring it back at a later time to sort of consolidate those ideas. So I have 3 slides at the beginning of this. This is the cover slide, if we could move on. So, and this is not intended to be comprehensive by any means. This is a real high-level view of city council meetings and policies. So in my short tenure here as mayor, what I've learned is that basically what we're doing here in these council meetings, whether they're special or regular meetings, is these are our board meetings. We're like the board for the city. And we have our CEO and CEO at the meetings, and they get to listen in. But the whole point of these meetings is to receive staff reports, get public comments, then we have discussions, and in general, we're here at the end to approve resolutions so that the CEO and the COO can do their job, and that's spending money. We're also here to develop policies that are ordinances. There's a lot of different flavors of them. And so that's the main reason we're here. Along the way, the public's allowed to talk about anything in certain cases, and that's a good thing for giving the public a chance to have a say. So if we could go to the next slide. So along the way, we have some policies. Do you actually have a cover page of that, or is this it?
Well, we have 2 slides here.
Okay, there it is. Okay. So many of you probably don't know that there is a policy and procedure document. The last version of it was done in 2020. And this sort of goes through the how-tos for how to run a meeting and other elements. And we're going to talk about a lot of these here tonight. So the point of this meeting is, since it hasn't been updated in 2020, and we seem to be having a lot of long meetings, we're going to try to figure out, are there some things that we can do to, A, make the meetings more effective, because we're here to make decisions, and 2, perhaps to shorten the meetings. Another way to do that is just have a lot of meetings, but it's a lot of work to do that. So we're going to be discussing a number of these policies and procedures here today. Brian's going to do part of it, I'm going to do part of it, and then the council is going to have a discussion. We're going to take it out to you to give us some ideas, and then we're going to come back and have another discussion. And then you have another shot at it. This is really important because even though this isn't the end of the discussion, it's important that we are doing everything we can to make these meetings as effective and efficient as possible. So I think that's a good kickoff to it, Brian, do you think?
Yes, it is. Thank you, Mayor. Can we go back to the slide before this one? There we go. So Section 3 of City Policy C89-02, the one that the mayor had referenced, that was last amended in 2020, is a discussion with respect to the conduct of city council meetings. And there's a subsection C of that meeting procedures, which describes the process, and there's 3 bullets there. First is that the mayor reads the agenda item. Second is that the staff presents a brief report, and then the council has questions for staff. So let's skip now to 2 more slides from this one. Heck, that's one. One possibility, if the council is interested, would be...
This is it. This is it. This is the correct one.
Yeah, this is the right one. One possibility in terms of providing some more detail to how this meeting process would work is the one you see on the screen here. Either something like this, or the number of steps could increase, decrease, change in description, but these were some that we had put together. The first is that, and some of them overlap with the existing policy, but some add some additional steps. So one is that the mayor reads the agenda item so that the council and the public knows what the item is. Secondly is that the mayor would ask if a council member wishes for a staff presentation. As everyone knows, under the Brown Act, our agenda is posted at least 72 hours in advance with a very detailed staff report, sometimes several pages long, often with many attachments. So both the council and the public will have received that information in advance of the meeting. So the question would become then, if you want to have a staff report presented or not, to at least ask the question. Thirdly would be that the mayor, if there has been a request, that the mayor would ask the staff to make a presentation. 4 is that the mayor would ask the council for questions, similar to what your process is now. 5 is the mayor asks for public comment, starting in chambers and then remote. 6, the council asks council for discussion. And finally, the mayor will ask the council to take action, which can include a motion, a resolution, an ordinance, or request for directions of staff. So basically, as you can see, this is more detailed than the current policy, which is just the 3-step. This is 7 steps, but it's not like each step takes a lot of time. I mean, it's a fairly iterative process, but if we wanted to, we could delete or modify some of these steps. All right, let's go to the slide on the agenda. That's the mayor's.
If I could add to that, Brian, is that okay?
Sure.
All right, go back. Yeah. This is what we're doing when I do my scripts, or Nova assists me doing the scripts. This is what we're doing. So what Brian is saying is we're going to memorialize what we're currently doing, because that's not currently in our policy. A key thing here that's a little bit different than what we've been doing is that to shorten the meetings, hopefully, because sometimes the staff reports could be a half hour, they could be even longer than that. If we've all read them and all the people here have read them, we can skip with these directions. We could skip the staff presentation either completely, or the staff would come prepared for maybe a Cliff Notes version, a 5-minute version, sort of like what I did with reading the consent agenda earlier, so that we don't skip it completely, but that we don't sit through something that we don't need. So that's different than what we've been doing, for sure, because I have not been saying, can we just skip the staff presentation? But I would be able to do that as mayor with these rules. So when we have the discussion with the public, we'd like to hear what you think of that. All right, next. Go ahead.
All right, can we go to the slide that says how the agenda is created? I think the mayor has some, there we go.
Yes, we sort of skipped over that. So I don't think many of the people in the room know how the agenda is created, and even my mayor pro tem and I are still learning how some of this happens, because staff has a lot of things that they have to get through and have us make decisions, so sometimes there's a little flux as this process is going through. But my current understanding, and Chip, you're here, so correct me if I'm wrong, staff determines what items are necessary to be handled at the next council meeting, what decisions they need to have made, and they are presented to the mayor, mayor pro tem, city administrator, assistant city administrator, city clerk, and city attorney the second Tuesday of each month. Correct so far?
Yes, sir.
Further discussion takes place and a proposed agenda is produced. We actually walk into the room with a proposed agenda at those meetings. And usually it's a special meeting, which is a Monday. It's the regular meeting, which is a Tuesday. And then sometimes there's actually a few items which are sort of tabled, but for future meetings that we could pull forward if we chose to. We have a discussion about all those items, and lately we've been trying to put a time frame on those. I don't know that we did that this time, but we've been trying to put a time frame on it so we can sort of manage the meetings better. Further discussion takes place either with us in our weekly meetings, and I imagine there's some level of dialogue going on between the other council members. I don't sit in on those meetings, so are you having discussions with the other council meetings in between the finalization?
The other members?
Yeah, the other members of
yes,
the council.
Sir. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And so one of the things that we've recently started doing is sharing, we call it agenda forecast, because again, it's really the mayor and the mayor pro tem who help. They decide what's on the agenda. Some of the items are regulatory in nature, yes. Right? So there's the Permit Streamlining Act, and there's some things that are pressing from the time perspective. So that's the way we kind of stage things. And then I've started to send it out to you in my weekend review. So again, that's something that I've talked to the other council members about.
Okay. Why don't you handle the rest of these, since a lot of this is happening behind the scenes?
Sure. Yeah. So I would say that some of the things, like for example, the item we just took a look at in the consent agenda, we got a request after we had met with the mayor pro tem to add an item for the Monterey County Symphony for a free use day. We couldn't put it on the May agenda because their event was at the end of what was before the next council agenda. So what we'll often do is I'll just bounce it off the mayor or mayor pro tem if it's very rudimentary in nature. We try not to, throw any curveballs or put anything of significance on the agenda without getting their blessing. So I agree that it's mostly the third bullet, fine tuning, mayor, that we do. And then of course there are, again, regulatory requirements for noticing certain items like ordinances and certain permits. So we make sure we meet the posting, NOVA make sure we meet all the posting requirements and taking out ads in the pine cone, for example.
And you might talk about the fact that we actually are exceeding the Brown Act rules for that. At a prior council,
we do, yeah.
Pushed it out.
We do that. We post on site. We do it a public display in a newspaper of a circulation of X, and then we post outside our public buildings as well.
But we also give it more than 72 hours. And even for the special meetings, we're doing it more than 72 hours, which is only 24-hour requirement.
Correct, for special meetings.
So we're giving all of us more time than is required by the Brown Act.
Right, and that's, I think that really speaks to our desire to have a very open and transparent agenda so people have the opportunity to wade through packets and digest what's going on and make comments.
All right, good, thank you. All right, next.
So we talked previously about the steps that would go through on an agenda item. This is addressing another issue, and that would be to add a third paragraph under public appearances, which would read as you see it on the screen. I can just summarize it by saying that there's requirements under the Brown Act. If it relates to an agenda item, they can speak to, public can speak to that, of course. And if it's not on the agenda and it's within the subject matter jurisdiction of the legislative body, then there can be what's sometimes called general public comment. Those are that's what the law says in the Brown Act. So if a member of the public should be attending the meeting, either in person or remotely, and they violate the Brown Act and they haven't complied with those requirements, then that speaker is going to be muted. So what we've done here is to present as an amendment to the policy this language. All right, next slide. Here's some additional provisions that you might want to consider. Remember, tonight is just direction. You're not making decisions. And as the mayor had indicated, he's requested the public give their suggestions and ideas as well. So when that's all been absorbed, we will come back at a future date. So public comment, as everyone knows, is typically 3 minutes. The mayor does have the authority under the Brown Act to increase or decrease the amount of time, depending upon circumstances. And then for public comment at regular meetings, as I mentioned previously, that would be on both agenda and non-agenda items. And then for public comment at special meetings, that would be for items that are on the agenda. Next slide. I think we're into your slides
we are.
now, Mayor.
Yeah, so I guess we could do this after we get some other council people to have some say in this. What do you think? Because
Well,
this is really my suggestions, separate from what you had put on the
right.
agenda. Do you want me to do this now?
Yeah, my suggestion would be that we go through the whole
Okay.
presentation and then council input on all of it.
Okay, so I've been auditing other cities' meetings, partly as a learning tool for me as mayor, but also because Monterey and Pacific Grove are our neighbors, and it's good to understand what's going on adjacent to us. And they're doing some interesting things, and they're doing it well, in my opinion. So this happens to be pulled from the Monterey cover sheet from their agenda. And I'm suggesting that there might be some things on here that we want to consider, and that's why we're here, is to discuss this sort of thing. They actually have broken up their council meetings, and many of their council meetings, including the one that's going on right now, they actually break their council meetings into two parts, like an afternoon session and an evening session, and then they break in between their what we call our bio breaks. They actually are scheduling it. And tonight they're actually taking a tour of their police station and fire station across the street and then coming back so they can discuss it. So what they do is they have two 15-minute public comment periods where we say we're going to have, like, we're suggesting 30 minutes. They break it up. You have 15 minutes at the beginning, and then you have 15 minutes. They do it at the beginning of their second session, which we don't really do, but you could also do it at the end of the meeting so that you can limit the amount of public comments at the beginning so we can get to our regular business items. They also have limits for the number of minutes handled for public appearances and public hearing items to 30 minutes per item and 15 minutes per item for all other things like consent agenda. So just more fine tuning of how the meetings are held. They also have a little bit different wording on the how you do Zoom and that sort of thing, and I think it's not bad. So it's something we could consider. If you want to go to the next slide. So this is another idea, and I'm not suggesting this. I'd love to hear what everybody thinks. If you want to make a comment at a coastal commission public hearing, you have to, in advance, go on their system. It's not a real sophisticated system, but you have to basically say, I want to make a public comment, and this is what I'm going to say ahead of time. And then they go through and they call those people out as they do their meeting. So this allows you to have a little bit better understanding of how long things are going to take and fine tune what's happening. We could also do a similar thing by just raising hands and saying how many people are going to talk, and I have been experimenting with that, so we can cut it from 3 to 2 minutes if I'm going to exceed the 30 minutes. And they also encourage you to do it way ahead of time, but you can do it, I think, up until 5 p.m. the day before. Go ahead. This is another, and this is just an attorney question. Monterey put this in, I don't know exactly when, but I think it was reasonably in the recent past, the Levine Act, and they talked about this at our training session that we went to in Sacramento recently, that you have to disclose, basically, if you receive contributions of more than $500, if there's a party that's being discussed in a council meeting, so that the public knows that, hey, I took more than $500 from this person. Not necessarily, it doesn't mean you can't participate, but you have to tell them that I did this. It's the Levine Act. And I don't know if you think it's pertinent for us to put this on our agenda page.
Well, you have the discretion to do that if you wish.
Yeah, I'm just throwing it out there for the council that this is something that Monterey thinks is important enough to put on their agenda page. I don't know if I have another one. Is that it?
Just the questions.
Okay.
So the recommendations tonight are to provide direction to the city administrator on the possible changes to the policy. Remember, that was the more detailed description of the steps, if you will, when you go through the agenda item, the 7 items. And then secondly, the possible change to the policy to add language regarding the Brown Act. And I would add to that whatever direction you may want to provide with respect to the comments that you heard from the mayor in terms of what some other cities are doing and the Coastal Commission is doing.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to open up to questions for council at this point. I have one, but I'm going to let it go around the table first. Anyone?
Questions or comments?
Questions right now, and then I'm going to take it to the public and bring it back. And if we have to, we'll do 2 rounds of this.
I have a kind of insubstantial questions related to the last thing, which was the $500 disclosure, which is fine. 2 questions are, one, there's a state law now about $250 contributions that has to do with, and I'm wondering, and I can't remember the government code number or anything like that, but it has to do with $250 made by parties or, you know, public hearing parties. Do you know what I'm talking about, Brian?
If you're talking about as a source of income?
No, I'm talking about there's something that came into effect last year. It was $250 campaign limits regarding people with issues at public hearings.
I think that's what we're looking at here. It's $500, and it's.
Is that what this is?
Yes.
So it's not.
You're just misremembering the amount.
I'm misremembering the amount. It's
right.
It's $500. It's $500.
It's $500.
Okay. And I was going to point out, I think Monterey actually, part of their charter is they have a $250 campaign contribution limit altogether. So given that, which is certainly of interest, I think should be of interest to us, but I don't think anything in Monterey would run afoul of this because of their campaign contribution limits.
Correct.
Anybody else?
I've got a bit of a question or maybe a clarification from Brian. For the item about muting people on Zoom if they're off topic, so that there's not a double standard if somebody is speaking here off topic, are we going to also make them stop talking?
The answer is yes, but typically when somebody's here in person, we haven't really had an issue with that historically, but we could add in person or remote if that was the direction of council.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question. Can you give us a little more color on subject matter of the jurisdiction?
Certainly. For example, sometimes you will have, just take a hypothetical, someone come in and start complaining about the Internal Revenue Service. Well, that's obviously not within your jurisdiction. My advice typically has been, and I've done this in my practice, would ask for the mayor to recognize me, and I would politely, of course, say, excuse me, but you know, the city doesn't have any jurisdiction over the Internal Revenue Service, so you know, could you limit your comments to a matter we do have jurisdiction over, and do it in a very polite manner. And then probably 90% of the time that works. There has been a few times when the speaker ignored me, basically, and wanted to continue. My advice under those circumstances has been let them finish their 3 minutes, even though it may not be, you know, within your jurisdiction. It's probably faster and less disruptive to just let the person finish their comments rather than to try to, you know, talk them down. So that's an example. And now that would be outside your jurisdiction. Something within your jurisdiction. Somebody complaining about the condition of the roads, or you know, whatever, you know, your parks, whatever the issue might be. If they're within your jurisdiction, something that you have power over, then that would be something that would be open for public comment. But if it's outside your jurisdiction, like the example I gave you, then that would be something that would not be proper comment.
Okay, so there is could be some broad discretion about what that is just from the conduct of the meeting.
Yeah, generally what my practice has been is if it's marginal, to let it go and not try to, get into a debate with the speaker. But if it's just completely, off topic and has nothing to do with your jurisdiction, then it's typically been my practice to at least make an effort to, request that the person limit their comment.
Okay. I might also add that policies and procedures document is 10 pages long. So there are a lot of things covered in it. All right, so if there are no other questions from the council. Oh, we've got one, okay.
So I grew up in the great state of Massachusetts, home of the town meeting, where you try to literally get everybody in the town into like the elementary school gym. And they literally won't let you into the gym unless you live in the town. And so, my question is, when we're talking about limiting public comment to a certain number of minutes, et cetera, I think my gut tells me I know the answer to this based on some of the other conversations we've had with Brian. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but would there be any possibility of giving a preference to people who actually live here in the village? Say we had a 30-minute time limit on public comment to say, hey, before the folks from Santa Cruz get to talk, the people from Carmel-by-the-Sea get to talk?
I've never seen that as a rule. Without doing the research, I'm inclined to say that we would not be able to favor city residents, but I've made a note of your question, and I can certainly get back to you on that.
Thank you.
So this is probably a comment phrased as a question, but so we're about to do something, which is we had a presentation, now we're asking questions, then we're going to go to the public, and then we're going to have a conversation. And I think in my experience, there are many times when our conversation and having our conversation, or at least some of it, before you go to the public is helpful, because you start to give the public some sense of where you might be going as a group. And that allows them to react a little bit more. Because right now we're asking the public to comment on something fairly broad. And we haven't given them more specifics about what we're about to do. So are we really, do we have to do it that way?
We don't. In fact, tonight, we are, after the questions are done, I'm going to have us have a discussion, and then we're going to go to them and then come back and give them another shot. We're going to give them a shot after our discussion tonight.
Okay.
And then we're going to have another discussion.
Okay.
So if I could supplement that.
Yeah.
The council has the discretion to hear public comment at whatever point in time in the process you wish. Typically, my experience is that the public comment comes after the questions of staff, so that the council can hear what the public comment is before the council starts its discussion, and then you will have been informed by the public of what their thoughts are, so that when you talk amongst yourselves, you are considering that. However, you could do both. You could have a question period, a discussion period, in the example that you gave, go out to the public, have further discussion, go back and forth like that. It would be a fluid process. You can allow multiple sessions of public comment. However, I would say this, that at whatever point you stop with the public comment and the discussion and you're moving into deliberations, that's probably a bright line where you likely would not want to be going back out to the public once you've started your deliberations. But you could.
Yeah, I know when I was just a resident and not an elected official, and a lot of it's because of Jeff, because Jeff many times was the one asking the really good questions. And I was like, wait a minute, I have something to say about it, but it's too late. So we're going to try it. And there's some things where it works and it's necessary. There are other things which are perfunctory and we're just doing our business where it doesn't. So go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
let's open it for discussion amongst us before we go to public comment.
Yeah, I think to your immediate point, I think that, cheating a little bit, like I'm as guilty of this as anybody, but, I occasionally use questions to reveal like my questions. And sometimes my questions are for, a lot of times my questions are for staff, but obviously my questions are things that I am interested in hearing about. And to the extent that I have a question about what a variance is or what an SRI is or something like that, like I'm interested in hearing what the public has to say on this. And I think that's, I would say that a lot of times that is on purpose. So I'll just go through, do you want me to just go through my list?
Yep.
I'll start from sort of the bottom and go back up to the top. Bob was talking about, do we need to have public comment only before the council discusses the matter? And the interesting thing about this, and sort of get on the soapbox a little bit, is that this discussion is about making meetings shorter. And, there's a tension between making meetings shorter and doing what Bob has suggested, which I partially agree with, which is allowing public comment to come in after we sort of start our discussion, because that is not going to make meetings. That is definitely not going to make meetings
If I could
shorter.
interrupt, what I said was making them more effective and perhaps shorter. Because the other way to have shorter meetings is to have more meetings. We want to have it. The number one thing is to have effective meetings, so we're making good decisions.
Yeah, and to that I would say that, it's hard on us, and I will only speak for myself, but it's hard on me to have 4 council meetings in 2 weeks. Like, that is difficult to do. And it's difficult to, for people who have sat in this chair like Karen has, or people who have not, it takes a lot of headspace preparation to get in the mood for a council meeting.
Especially at 4:30 to 10:30 at night.
Yeah, it's not just, getting ready for a police station. The police station meeting we had last week is not a 2-hour task. It's a couple of days of just being in a sort of a daze. Mm-hmm. And so having more meetings is not necessarily, what I would prefer or not, or, I would be on the fence. I did, since I do have an iPad here and the city has provided me an internet connection, I did look up the Levine Act, Brian, and I am looking at the FPPC page on section 804, this page, and it does say $250. So I'm looking at a page, and maybe it has changed, but I'm looking at the FPPC document from October of 2023, like from the FPPC's website, and it's $250, not.
I can confirm that amount.
Okay. So I'll continue to go back up my list. Public comment, I would say that. Yeah.
Yes, I've opened it to comments.
He opened it to
We're
comments.
trying the idea, partly what Bob said earlier, so before they comment, they know what we're thinking before they comment. We're trying it out.
Okay.
So I think, I'll preface my comments by saying I love public comment. It's, my favorite part of the meeting right after talking to the 4 of you. I think you often learn things from the public that you don't expect to learn, and so I'm a pretty big believer in that. I think that you talked about, and I'm responding to this presentation, not really you. The presentation talked about limiting public comments to 15 minutes or 30 minutes, and I think that replaces one can of worms with a different can of worms. I think that to Hans's question about allowing people from making people from without our jurisdiction proceed to the end of the line, and sort of the impracticality of doing that, because now so for example, you would be like, I own a business in Carmel. Am I allowed to speak with the locals or the not local? Like, which section of public comment? I think that suggestion opens a whole can of worms. But I think that limiting public comments to 30 minutes or some defined amount, it does the same thing. Opens up a whole different can of worms. Because how are you going to decide? 15 people line up at the microphone. How are you going to decide? How's the mayor going to decide where? Since you call on people to be public comment, how are you going to decide which 10 people get to talk? And what happens when the people that are here to talk about something the council did 5 years ago line up first, and they chew up 20 minutes of the 30 minutes of public comment time, and the people that want to talk about material issues that are more, more timely to the business that we do. What happens when they don't get their time and they then have to wait until, to use your words, 10:30? So I think that there's a whole can of worms involved in sort of doing that.
Could I ask for your opinion on, do you think we should just have an hour and a half of public comment? Do you think we could split it up at the beginning and ending of the meeting? Well, I think we could say we have 30 minutes, how many people are there, and there's 20 people, so everybody gets a minute and a half?
Well, I have two suggestions. One, I think that, taking a poll of how many people are here for public comment is a great idea. And I think that limiting it to 2 minutes, I think that narrowing the amount of time required allotted to people to 2 minutes instead of 3 minutes is is more equitable in terms of the people that show up. Like, people show up to make public comments. Like, I often did that. Like, I'm here for my 3 minutes, and I may grouse a little if you only give me 2 minutes, but I'm going to grouse a lot if you make me wait until 9:30. So I think that there's a more benefit into making 2 minutes. And you said, I'm always amused when I think about this. I once had a conversation with an ex-mayor of the city of Davis. And for those of you that don't know, Davis has an incredibly active public, just the same as ours. And his method of dealing with it was to give the people, so when they would have 50 people lining up to speak on an issue such as addresses, his philosophy was to allow the people that only wanted 1 minute to speak first. And so if you are going to allow 45 minutes of public comment on the issue of addresses, or let's say, to your example, beginning and end of the meeting, well, if you want 1 minute, you can go now. If you want 2 minutes or 3 minutes, you're going to go to the end of the line, and there's some risk that you're going to end up sent back to the 9:30 page. Okay. And that, to me, is completely fascinating idea. When we have the address comments tomorrow, we'll hear a lot of the same things over and over again, which is fine, which is not fine, but it's fine. But I think that allocating people 1 minute and saying you can go first and then you can leave is really a fascinating idea that you might think about when you talk about limiting the amount of time. Or moving some of it to the back. I have a bunch of comments on the staff report stuff too, but maybe, I can either go those, or we can talk about. You want me to just give those two?
Go ahead. Try to be as brief as you can.
Yeah. Okay. I think so. I'm of the camp. I think if we ask staff to produce a staff report, we should allow staff to produce a staff report. Like, I think it's, the few times that we have not done that, the few times that we did not do that last year, I think it's very disrespectful of staff time to ask them to put hours and hours into the production of a staff report that we may or may not finish, we may or may not be interested in, and have them, and then say, no, we're change, we're not interested.
Could we suggest that they take their 45-minute staff report that we read and cut it down to 10 or 15
I think
minutes?
that's, so I'll be honest with you. I mean, you're sitting in that chair, and I think that's your responsibility. Like, I think that is, you do agenda forecasting, you and Bob and Chip and Brian and all the people that work for Chip and Brian do agenda forecasting. And I realize that that's an imperfect science. But I think that's up to you. I think that's a decision. I think that's a decision that you should make beforehand. Yeah. And the risk you run is that when you leave things out of a staff report, it takes twice as much time, because then I'm going to have a question. Yeah. Which brings me to the second point. Staff reports surface issues that appear between the publication of the agenda and the hearing. And staff gets public comments, we get public comments. I'll have questions. I've been asking Chip and planning staff questions about items on the agendas tomorrow. And some of my comments will make it into will make it into the staff report. And, when I ask Evan a question about site coverage and, or what happened at previous staff, I'm interested in those, and he doesn't have the answer right now to present them to me. And so I say, just put it in the presentation, and that alleviates, the responsibility of me to ask a question. And I would hate, I don't want Evan to put a slide in the presentation and then have us not review, because,
Then you've got to ask the question again. And
I've got to ask the question again. I may not remember because I can be kind of addled. And sometimes, going back to sort of cheating again, when I ask questions or we have comments at the meeting, that's, the people I'm talking to, everybody sitting in the audience, but a lot of times I'm talking to the four of you. And when I ask staff a question, sometimes I think that all of us need to know the answer to the question. It's important to me that we all know. And I would hate for that to get buried. I would hate for, information like that to get buried, or for me to be on the spot, or someone else to be on the spot during a council meeting to say, yeah, I'd really like the 15-minute presentation. That puts me in an awkward position to take up everybody's time. And I'd really not have to do that. And finally, and maybe most importantly, sometimes I think of the staff report as being sort of the presentation to be sort of an abbreviated version of the staff report. And I think that is very, very helpful for people that are watching the meetings after the meeting. I realize it's not sort of a perfect analog or a perfect summary of what's in the staff report. But if you turn it into a meeting on like the 3 appeals we're going to see tomorrow, and there are no staff reports, like we're all really up to date on the staff reports, and no, we don't need the presentation or whatever, they're just abbreviated presentations. I think that's going to make it really, really difficult for someone that comes in after the meeting to watch the video and get the sort of train of what really happened at the public meeting.
especially a year later. I mean,
It's
almost impossible to go back and find that staff report and read it at that point. Excellent point. Excellent point.
And I think that's a real
Yeah.
problem. So
Great.
those are my comments. Thank you.
Very good. Nice comments, Jeff. Appreciate it. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll go.
Okay.
Thank you, Jeff. Good stuff. I guess I'll start with public comment. And by that I mean public comment on items not on the agenda. While I agree with everything that Jeff said, the reality is that our public comment period has been abused significantly in the past few years. And I think the positive impacts of that are minimal. We celebrate freedom of speech, First Amendment, and and all of that, which I support. But the downside is that not only is our time, I think, wasted, not only are we forced into later evenings when we are less effective, I think the abused party ends up being our citizens because it wears us down. And as a result of that, I would be in favor of some time limits or something that has us less exposed to that risk. And I think there's some, maybe if we can get agreement to just try something. The suggestions you came up with from Monterey, I think, are very interesting. And on top of that, from the Coastal Commission, that if we want to ask ahead of time for people, if people want to basically seek approval to come to tomorrow's meeting or next Monday's meeting or next Tuesday's meeting, that is a way of triaging this, and it does give the mayor or whoever the power to arrange them in an order, and publish that. And I mean, the risk is always, because I'm going to have more comments here where that a lot of this and getting some of this right does end up going back to the mayor and how the mayor is running the meeting and the mayor's common sense and discretion, and when is the right time to do something and not to do something. But if you have an abusive mayor, that's not good, because that's too much. It can be a lot of control. But so back on the public comments, just to put it out there, I would suggest starting with the 15-minute afternoon and the 15-minute evening suggestion. Give it a try, see what we think. And I would also be open to some sort of pre-approval, or you got to sign up, or it's first come, first serve. Jeff's idea, coming from Davis, of if you're willing to speak fast, you can speak first, is kind of brilliant, because it'll force people to be succinct. And then that makes sure you're going to be heard. And if you just want to pontificate and take up our time, you're going to run out of the 15 minutes or the 30 minutes. So I quite like that. In terms of the 7 steps, right, of how we run a meeting, I'm just in favor of optionality. And I think what I heard from Brian is that we have optionality, that we can do public comment at the right time to do public comment. And, you know, again, I think I've been in a mayor's chair, and you learn when sometimes you just know that this is a topic where maybe we need to just tease a little bit more out of the city council before we go to public comment. Jeff's a professional. I mean, you're not professional. You've done this a long time, and I'm the same way. You can make a lot of statements by asking the right question, and sometimes I think that's just kind of a game, and sometimes there really are questions that need to be asked, and I think you're very good at that. But sometimes I think it's just, let's not mask our comments as questions. Let's just have some comments here. And then like that, go to public comment, and then it still comes back for questions. And if you as mayor think it needs to go back to public comment another time, that's okay. But you got to be right. That Brian said is that once you reopen public comment, you have reopened public comment. And I think there are times when that is absolutely the best thing you can do, because that just says you're making progress to me.
Part of it is how many. If there are 30 people, 40 people, it's probably not a good idea.
There you
If
go.
there are 5, like the other night when we only had 4 people here.
Yes.
And we sort of did that. Yeah.
On the skipping of staff presentation, in general, I think it's a bad idea. But I think there may be times when I don't think we want to be able to sort of opt into staff presentations, but perhaps we could opt out of them. You know, I think we want to assume that staff is prepared. Staff is going to give us a presentation, and we're going to hear the presentation. But if we are also at a point where perhaps the meeting is late, there are extenuating circumstances. We actually just had it, and it actually was in those appeals when Catherine was here, Catherine Wallace, and we just kind of said, you said it, Dale, Catherine, be quick. And you know what? She was quick, and she was good.
Yes.
So and that's a skill, but the ability to get through a 15-minute presentation in 5, and she did, and I don't think we missed a thing at all. And I think we made a good decision, and I think that decision would hold up a year from now if somebody took a look at that. So some of that is just a lesson to staff in how to do better presentations, but if we don't let them do presentations, they'll never get better at it. So I think we got to keep doing it. Something that I would value is we've had several times recently where the first time I'm seeing the presentation is when it lands on my desk. Oh, just like this one, at 4:25. And sometimes I know that is what you have to do, but for meaty topics, I think we really need those presentations in the packet. And like just earlier, the one on the police station, that was not in our packet. that was a pretty meaty, substantive thing that should have been in the packet, and we shouldn't be running out of time and having those presentations creep in. They need to be ready for the packet, because that's it's really significant. On what Chip, on setting the agenda, I would love for us to be thinking of agendas 3 months out, and that as you socialize agendas with each of us, that you do in that 3 months out, so that you're always kind of talking 3 months at a time. To some extent, that's so that because all of us feel things need to be on agendas at certain times, and if you can say, I don't think we have time, or I've discussed this with the mayor and the mayor pro tem, they don't think we have time in April, but that we do have time in May or June for that, and it's important, but it's not urgent. We can put it out there in 2 more months. That can help us manage this month's agenda, because sometimes we do feel it's important and urgent, and it's not. It is important, but it can go a month, and just try to go after it that way. That's what I got.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mayor. So we've had a lot of meetings in the past 9 days. We've had 5. I'm going to include the housing element in that. And it just gets to be too much. It gets to be too much for the public, and it gets to be too much for staff and for council as well, as Jeff mentioned, very rightly so. It's not just the time that we spend at the meeting. There's an awful lot of preparation time that goes into these meetings, not only reading, but talking to people and becoming better informed on all these topics. So I'm very concerned that our meetings have been very long, and by the way, everything I'm saying here is constructive criticism. This is not meant to, be an attack on anybody, but I would like us to work on making them shorter. As we've heard, it's very hard to be effective the longer the meeting goes, and people are tired and people have responsibilities at home, and there just needs to be a time when we cut these things off and maybe just say, we're going to continue this meeting sometime within the next 2 weeks, and get a time and just continue it, because it's really, it's not fair to the public as well, especially if they want to speak to a topic. I know that we've tried within the past couple of months to do time estimates, but those have been wildly off. To be kind. So I don't see anything wrong with that, but if they were a little bit more accurate to how much, if it says 15 minutes, but we're spending an hour and 15 minutes on something, there's something wrong with that process of putting the time limits on it. And on many of these things, it really does feel like we do have too much on the agenda. And as Bob rightly said, there might be things that seem important, but honestly, they could wait another month or so to just manage it better, to encourage the participation of everyone, and just have better meetings. As far as the presentations, I definitely agree with everything that I heard from Jeff and Bob. The problem that I see is that they are not in the packet, and many times they are different than what's in the staff report. The PD meeting that we just had a week ago is an example of that. The one that I also recently noticed was the social media policy. I read everything in that staff report, and I had a ton of questions. I didn't understand anything about what it actually was till we had the presentation, which I didn't even see till it was, during the council meeting. So that's a problem. That's a problem for us making decisions, and for the public as well to be informed about what we're doing. So I would say we need to find a way to make those presentations be part of the agenda packet when it's released, that people can go through this, because there's a lot of different information that is not part of the staff report. So it's getting those ready early, I think, is absolutely key. Let's see. I definitely think we need to keep the presentations, barring extreme circumstances. If it's a very, very late meeting, maybe shortening it, but not getting rid of them at all and requesting them. I don't think that's a good idea. As far as going back to the public after they've had public comment, unless it's a very, maybe really controversial issue that you really do want to hear more from people, yes, that would be a good time, but not on a regular basis. I think that will just drag things out too much time-wise. And as far as public comment, I think it's very important for people to be heard, and that's main reason why a lot of people come to these meetings, is to be able to be heard. I don't like the idea of limiting it, but on the other hand, sometimes on our regular Tuesday meetings, between all the introductory stuff we have and public comment, we haven't actually started our meeting with the actual orders of business till almost 6 o'clock. So we spent an hour and a half between presentations and high school reports and all that. So if there's something we can do, I noticed in the past couple times, Mayor, you've asked how many people are going to speak, and you get a gauge of, if it's 15 people, maybe give them the 2 minutes rather than 3. I think that's still fair because you still get to speak. You're not being curtailed, but it's just a more efficient way of holding the meeting. I hate the idea of making people wait to the end, but on the other hand, we need to get the meeting going. So I think a lot of this is your discretion and a lot of trial and error, and certainly you can get feedback from all the rest of us here and the public as well for what's working. And I think that was it.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I agree with a lot of those comments. The one thing I would say is we shouldn't beat ourselves up too badly, because I think pretty much city meetings, kind of wherever you are, go late into the night, right? I remember being a kid, and these things would go till midnight. So we should be a little bit easier on ourselves there. I could not agree more with the comment that you made, Bob, and that you seconded here, Alessandra, on that staff presentation being sent in advance would really be helpful for me. We really don't want to be looking at something for the first time on the fly, in the meeting. It's sort of a joint effort, right? Like, we can be more succinct in our comments. That certainly can help. We can make sure that the staff's presentations are really tight. I'm reminded of that, I guess, to paraphrase like the Mark Twain quote, like, I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one, right? So keeping it kind of tight and succinct. I'll just go through kind of the two main questions that I saw. That making the staff report optional at the request of a council member. I think that idea of having the default being that the report is not going to be presented, I think the goal is admirable. Like, we want to run efficient meetings, but I think it's a bad idea for a lot of the reasons that have been mentioned. The presentation is really for the public. It also, I think, memorializes it for the future, as was mentioned in that video. I've gone back and watched those videos. I know others have. Sometimes I would walk into a meeting, several years back, and I hadn't sat there and read the staff report, right? I walked into the meeting and was expecting someone to tell me what that item was so that I could, think about it intelligently. And I think that's really important. I also, to your point, Alessandra, like, they're often quite different, right? And so we could probably try to harmonize those a little bit to the point of including them earlier on in the packet. But to the extent that they are different, it's important to be able to hear that, right? Like, the voiceover that I hear from the staff in those presentations differs substantially from what I read in that staff report, oftentimes. And so I think that's kind of an important point. And then, the point about, like, if we're going to tell staff to prepare the report, it feels like we should probably have them present the report. Because otherwise, what happens is if you wind up having these reports that people are putting hours and hours into formulating, and then they don't get presented, like, what do you think is going to happen to the quality of those reports over time, right? And I think a lot of it, this question of defaults, and you touched on this a little bit, the social dynamics, I think, is troubling, because you do get to the point in a meeting where, the pressure is just so intense, like this sort of like the, to say, hey, we're not gonna listen to the staff report. And I don't think that's helpful. So I'm really against that one. On the public comment piece, I would just wonder if it's a solution in search of a problem. Like, the long public comment instances really figure prominently in our minds. But I'd be curious, like, it'd be interesting to just have staff go back and just look maybe for the past couple of years at the Tuesday meeting, and just in the video, this would take somebody like an hour. How long are those public comments, right? Really, just like, when did it start? When did it end? How long was the public comment? And I think we might be surprised. I think it's probably relatively rare that it goes over 30 minutes. And I wonder, like, will we wind up cutting off more residents on some of those issues, like on addresses, right? On housing, on some of these issues that people are really jazzed up about. We have this policy where we wind up cutting off more, residents than, out of town cranks in practice. The last thing that I would say, and this one I think is important. People really like prepare these public comments. Not all of them, some of them. And it is, I think, a little disrespectful to the people, like I'm looking at Nancy Toomey here, like writes out her public comment. I think it is a little disrespectful, like I've written out a public comment that might take me like 2+ hours to try to like get it really succinct. And I've got a 3-minute comment, and then at the last minute, it's a switcheroo or it's a 2-minute comment. I think Neil Cruz made a point on these lines the other night. And I find that kind of unfortunate. So, in any case, I think there's things that we can do, but just need to be thoughtful about it.
Okay, I'll give some of mine now. Brian, this is probably something you could just fix, but the current policy says that items pulled from the consent agenda are normally moved to the end of the meeting. And I don't think I've ever seen that done.
You have discretion on where you want to put the consent item.
But is there any reason to put it in the policy?
Well, policy's a policy. And in terms of pulling it and where you put it, you can change that.
But I'm just saying, maybe we just want to take that out.
We can do that?
Yeah. I don't know how the rest of you feel, but we've never done it. And it's in the policy, so.
I've never seen that happen.
Yeah, so I think that's just something we could just.
What I have seen happen, as long as you're working on this section of the policy, if I may, is that sometimes when it becomes clear that a lot of council members are interested in something, it just gets continued to the next meeting for the preparation of a staff report. So I think that's probably happened half a dozen times.
Yeah, so if it's a bigger issue than we thought, we just take it on again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. It also says that a question for information only about the consent agenda item should be asked prior to the meeting rather than pulling the item for discussion during the meeting. That's maybe something for Chip, because you're the one that has the conversation with people. Same with corrections to the minutes. It seems that even if a question is asked prior to the meeting, that it could be useful for the public to hear the discussion about that item, which is some of the relevant things to the comments that we've heard earlier. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, we have a history of council members that engage in a dialogue. So you ask, it's really helpful, and I'm really grateful. You ask questions, you point out errors in the packet as it's being produced. So it's not like you're in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee singing, getting, whatever. It's much more congenial. So we appreciate that. So let's just
leave that in there.
Leave that in
okay,
there. And
good.
Keep it up, please.
It's not like a requirement. This sort of says like that's how it should be done, but
yeah,
it's just a suggestion. Okay, so maybe just the wording. Meeting cutoff time. I forgot to put that in my slide, but other cities have a cutoff time, and as it gets close, in PG the other night, there was an item I was interested in, and they were almost cut it off after people sat there for 5 hours. So do we want a meeting cut it like at 10:30? The meeting ends, no matter where we're at. Or is that just something you want me to manage?
I have an answer.
Go ahead.
I think that's...
You were there.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, thanks for reminding me. The answer is some cities will have a what they call a curfew at whatever point in time you want it to make it. I've seen some at 11 o'clock, some at 10. And what will happen is when you are starting to approach the time and you realize that maybe you're going to be able to wrap it in a half an hour or something, and you may go over your curfew, the mayor will say, can I have a motion to extend the time to finish this item? So
It
that's
did get
what I
PG
see.
to hurry up and get to that point.
Yeah, thankfully, yes, that was good.
It did.
But I know.
Okay, so you're saying
You could,
maybe
you
not.
could impose a time limit. I guess you want to get feedback from the council. You could have a curfew if you want to.
Okay, well, let's see
call
what the
that.
public thinks.
Okay.
Also, should we have a time limit for council members? I mean, if we want to really speed the meetings up, and I'm not taking a position on that, but we can talk forever. And when I was in the public, I was thinking, how come Potter cut me off at 3 minutes and they talked for 20 about the same thing? So, and by the way, I spent hours writing 3 minutes and I tested it 3 times. I was going to nail that 3 minutes. And what I've been telling Neil and other people that come every meeting, I've been coaching them like, I'm going to teach you how to use ChatGPT to take your 3 minutes and make it 1 minute and 20 seconds, and it'll be perfect, and we will hear every word you say. And we should have a class, because you can take 3 minutes down to a minute and a half, and it is more effective, because I've been sitting here listening to the 3 minutes, and after a while, you just glaze over, but that's another thing. What I'm hearing, what I think I've heard a little bit of is tighten up staff reports, and that's something you could coach your people to do. Tighten up public comments, that's something I just discussed. And then tighten up council comments, which is something we can all do. I mean, if we all do that, we're going to help. But given that, and that's my comments right now, I'm going to open it up for public comment. Hopefully somebody has something to say after all that. Nancy will. Hi, Nancy.
Nancy Toomey. All right, thank you for this topic. I have 5 items. The one thing that you had not mentioned is the sequencing of an agenda. There's no discussion about how you choose to sequence things. And I think when we've got big topics, I think it's important to either set a firm-ish time when that topic is going to start, and or make sure that that's very early in the agenda if you've got a room full of people wanting to express their opinion. So I think sequencing is a thing that needs some clarity, and or just for the general public to understand how you go about doing that, so that we can be efficient with our participation. The next item you kind of touched on, at least in part here, was the differences between the staff report and the PowerPoint that's presented. And I understand that the staff report is generally a narrative. I get that. Presentations are presentations and more condensed, and often that condensing and or bulleted approach provides clarity that the written report does not. And I understand also that they're time constrained too, maybe preparing the written report and then the PowerPoint isn't available until Monday morning, making it up, I don't know, you guys tell me. But even having the agenda updated with the PowerPoint presentation that you'd like to try to get done by Monday morning, that still gives us 18 hours worth of time to at least go through the slides, as well as obviously you benefit from that. So and I understand that from the time the agenda is posted, there might be some requests for clarity that are coming from the public and or from you all, and that can be incorporated into what is ending up being presented if you can do it that way. Again, I don't know what the rules are, you tell me. So talking about the differences between the staff report and the PowerPoint. I would like to offer a suggestion to time limit the exceptional items that come up front. Those have been going quite long in recent times. I love them. It's a great kind of warm and fuzzy about what's going on in town, but they need to be tighter in time, in my opinion. And then I think when you were talking about reopening the possibility of a discussion after deliberation or some level of deliberation occurs, even if what you consider up front is saying, can I get a show of hands, are you on the same page with where you hear the council is going? You could do a show of hands to get a little bit of a reading instead of opening it up to the public. Possibility. And then the last one is on the appeals that are showing up right now. I know I'm supposed to end. Hopefully things like design traditions and new ordinance updates and objective design standards will help get some of those off your plate sooner than later. Thanks.
Thank you, Nancy. Great comments. Hi, Donna.
My name is Donna Jett, and I don't come here to speak. I come here to listen. But there's one thing that Nancy, I agree. Who sets the position of the items on the agenda? Okay, I've been here, and I object most of the time to move them, because if you have hot topics, the library, the police station, our addresses, you'll have a huge crowd. You can decide to put them first or last. And if they're really interested, as I am, in addresses, I will be here till the end. Moderately interested and they get the agenda, they don't want to sit here till 10 or 11, they can leave. And then the one meeting that they wanted their item because the waiting for an attorney was moved, and I object to that. Leave it where it is. They knew about it, we knew about it. And then the console. You were perfect. 4 questions or 4 suggestions. No more stories or anecdotes about the past anywhere else outside here except Pacific Grove, because that's relevant. I think there's council members could stay on topic too. Mundane things. As much as I'm happy to meet Mary Walker, is it necessary? She's got a contract to be on the agenda? I don't know. I mean, I don't know. And then I agree with lining up people. And if they want to stand in line, and I'm one of them, 20 people, while they all talk for 3 minutes, for an hour, if not, they can leave. I mean, it's a choice that we have to talk or not talk and what we have to say. So, and the residents, and not many, there's several of us that show up. I'm just nosy, I like to be here. But the residents that care will show up or watch it online. So you're already appealing to all of us. And there was many years I didn't show up. And there's many years that other people did, and now they don't come back. If there's an issue of interest, I think they'll show up. So, and if you can decide if there's 20 people, they should get 1 minute. And they don't have to go on ChatGPT to get to that 1 minute. Bye.
Could you clarify your comment about 30 people speaking? I missed your point.
Well, 20 people, if you give them 3 minutes, how long is that?
It's an hour.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
So what's your point?
The point is, if they want to stand here and wait and be 19 and 20, that's up to them.
So you're saying we should take an hour if we have
No, I think that those things you have to make your discretion. You have to come up with it. If you see 20 of us, you should say 1 minute or whatever. If you're able to do that legally, yes.
Okay.
I agree. That's crazy because they're repeating the same thing.
So you're saying an hour is too long?
Way too long.
Okay. All right, good. Okay.
Hi, Karen Ferlito. You know, democracy is messy, but it is what we have, and people have the right to speak, and they have the right to be heard. The council, as I understood it, was supposed to hear a staff report, ask clarifying questions, and then open it to the public. If you discuss things first, like you just did, the public thinks you've already made up your mind, and your mind is supposed to be somewhat open at that point. Also, one of the things is when you are watching on Zoom and you want to speak, your voice should count just as much as the people in the room. And also, I feel very strongly as a former council member that people who take the time to write you an email, the email should be read and they should be counted as well. Time is important, yes, and shortening things would be laudable. But if you cut off the public becomes unsupportive of what you're doing. They know you're working hard. They know you're reading lots of papers and reports. It's very important, I think, to have the presentations because that's the first time all 5 of you are hearing the same words and the same presentation. Because you're getting a little bit different in your meetings with Chip or with staff. So I think it's really important, and it's very important for residents who don't have the same obligation, because as an elected official, you are obligated to study the packets and be responsive to it. But a person who is a novice at a government, they just think, oh gosh, this is important, I want to read about it, but they don't understand it, they deserve to hear a staff report. And so important for when you go back and listen to the YouTube or whatever, to actually understand what the staff was presenting. One of the most egregious things that happened last year was when Mayor Potter decided to not hear a staff report, which had been prepared by the attorney. There was an attorney on the line. The staff person had spent hours and hours and hours on that report. We're going to hear that report tomorrow night, finally. But that was very egregious. None of us on the council were prepared that that was going to happen, and that was not fair. The other thing I would suggest is that the mayor pro tem be tasked with keeping track of what the other members or what the public wants on future agendas, so it doesn't fall out and then have to be repeated and repeated. When are we going to hear this? When are we going to hear that? That'll be a good job for Bob to keep track. I always thought that was supposed to be what was happening. Thank you very much. I appreciate all of you. And remember, democracy is messy, but it's important.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. And your comment about the emails, I wrote down, because there may be a way for us, some of them come late, like today, but like 2 hours before. Maybe if we have a cutoff, that if you send your emails in like 24 hours ahead of time, that we have like a ChatGPT version of what the points were, and we could present them, because they're not here. Yeah. So, I mean, some way to get that across to everybody, so everybody doesn't have to read all the emails. I thought that was an interesting idea. Thank you. All right, I'm going to bring it back. Any more? Somebody, good. We have Maria. Go ahead. I'll let Nova call them out.
Maria, go ahead.
Hello, this is Maria Roos. Sorry I couldn't join you in the chambers. I have a couple comments from your suggestions. The first one was about the staff reporting. I find that to be an extremely critical item. I think is, like many comments were made, I think it's an important asset to have the staff present, basically from a training standpoint, from an ability for them to share their thoughts and basically their analysis with more detail, to basically allow us to address questions to the staff directly, because not all questions come from the council members. Some of us may bring different questions. So I think it's extremely important to allow the staff members to present a report once it's produced and they come to the chambers. The other piece is what I find the question I will have to that item was, if all of a sudden we're sitting at the chamber and a council member decides to make the decision to not allow a staff member present, the problem I have there is, okay, so what about us, the public? Were we supposed to send our comments ahead of time? Is that going to be written in the policy so that we have to, every comment sent ahead of time so the staff can address them during the non-presentation? So I would suggest we allow all staff members to present when they're required or asked to prepare a report. That's number one. The second piece is, I accept the challenge of us citizens being prepared when we come forward with a question or a comment regarding a report or an item on the agenda, 100%. I would expect the same thing from council members. I would expect that all you council members have read and are prepared on the presentation, on the documentation that is being discussed, and that you're not seeing it for the first time while you're sitting there. Because that is extremely important so that you make the right decisions. So I think balancing even the timing of the time the council members speak will be very appropriate, in my opinion. And by the way, I have Kevin sitting next to me, so he's going to ask a question.
Well, not a question, a comment. So this would be my 3 minutes. We're on the same login ID here. I appreciate the council's taking the time to discuss the management of public meetings and making them more effective and so on. But in terms of speaking time for the public, I wonder if there's a risk of disenfranchising people who want to say something, but when there isn't enough time, you don't get to them because other people have been long-winded. I'm not sure what the solution to that is, because clearly a meeting that runs into the wee hours of the morning, which apparently happens in some California cities, is, let's say this, the older you get, the harder that's going to be, right? So I do really like the idea that Jeff Barron mentioned of letting people who commit to 1 minute go first, then 2 minutes, then 3 minutes. I think there's some merit in that. I have spoken many times in meetings, and there have been a number of times when I probably could have done it a little faster, even though I spend hours composing these things before I go to a meeting. There have been times when I've sat in a meeting and I've asked myself, well, maybe we should put a time limit on council members. But as I think about that, even though I feel it, I think it's a bad idea because we have a representative democracy, and part of being represented is that I have in fact chosen you all to speak for me. And I don't really want dialogue that my representatives are participating in to be curtailed. You can chide each other, or the mayor can kick in and say, can we get to the point, or whatever like that. But I think that would be something to bear in mind when trying to make meetings more effective. Thank you.
And I have one last item, which is a suggestion. Maybe we put times on the agenda for the different items. So let's say one item is 10 minutes, the other item is 30 minutes, and we time our agenda to see if we start better at time management. Just a suggestion, like all agendas. And the last item was, if the staff can produce also an executive summary kind of thing for the presentations, yet a report being delivered, that could be another thing that could help if it's just as executive summary level when the presentation gets delivered. That's it. Thank you.
I think the two of you are also suggesting a husband-wife comment section.
We appreciate you listening to both.
But you both always have good comments, so we appreciate it.
Thanks.
Charles Najarian, go ahead.
Hello, thank you for this agenda item. It's encouraging to hear you all speak about this, frankly, and I think the comments have all been exceptional. I have my own opinion about the public process here. I think it is barely a public process. That doesn't mean I have a solution to this, but residents are delegated to one-way 3-minute sound bites. And I think they've been conditioned to believe that the decision-making process is a popularity contest. And anything you can do to assuage that opinion or belief would be helpful in, I think, reducing the time spent at meetings. I think they've been conditioned to play this game, and I have some ideas that might help. One, I think that written comments could deflect some of this. Written comments, however, from my perspective and what I've experienced is I've never once, any written comment I've submitted has never once been acknowledged. And I think Karen Toledo suggested written comments should be acknowledged and suggested they should be read. I think that's a pretty good idea, except for a lot of the stuff I write would take you 5 minutes to read. So, but I think some way to acknowledge that would at least make me feel like I've made my comment, they've acknowledged it, I think they understand it, and I don't need to waste their time. The other thing I thought of was where I came from, we had a public advisor in the agency, and that person facilitated and represented the public generally in terms of their participation. And that might help here. I don't know of any local agency that has that, but it's something to consider. And I'll close by saying I'm really impressed with this city council. And I mean that. I'm impressed with the brain power. I'm impressed with the comments. I'm also impressed that the staff has upped their game at the same time. And so I'll just close with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. And I'll speak for the council. We appreciate your comment. Kind words.
Okay. Cindy Lloyd. Cindy, you can unmute yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. The audio is such that I couldn't hear what you said, so I'm sorry if I didn't respond quickly. There's a kind of an old saying among public speaking is that be brief, be sincere, and be seated. And I learned that long ago when I had to suddenly start public speaking when I was in nursing school. Before I speak to the council, I always write something out. I time it. I shorten it. I try and keep it within the 3 minutes. I always keep it within the 3 minutes, and I try to do even more than that. What I find is that when I'm listening to a lot of other people, they have not, they haven't got their comments consolidated so that they repeat themselves, and if I do it, I'm sorry. So that in repeating themselves, they take extra time. If people could just say what they mean and mean what they say and do it quickly, that would be very helpful. The interesting comment by the previous speaker on things being a popularity contest, I'm finding a bit of that. When the word goes out, everybody, descend on City Hall because we all need to speak about this issue. I don't find that is particularly helpful to that issue. It's not the number of people speaking, it's the ideas that they present that I think is important. However, public comment is an important part of the meeting, and to try and shorten it up really short might be a detriment to people wanting to express their opinions, because there isn't any time when we can speak to all 5 of you at one time, when you could all 5 hear what we have to say at the same time. So I will say thanks very much, and you're doing a great job, and thanks for bringing this whole subject up for some consideration.
Thank you, Cindy. We appreciate your comment, and I appreciate all the comments from everybody. So are we going to bring it back? Do you guys want to have another discussion? Do you think you've got any other ideas you want to surface?
I think we should.
Okay. All right. So we're going to bring it back again. And
Mayor, did we want to discuss the curfew meeting cutoff time today, or do we want to bring that back?
You can discuss it right now. Anything that is on the table for further discussion.
All right. Well, I would love to see, let's say 9:30. I mean, because it's very draining when you're up here. I mean, you're focused, you're concentrating, and it's tough for the members of the public who are here, and it's tough for staff that have family back at home. So, can I throw that out there? Would the rest of the council feel okay if we set 9:30 as a cutoff time? And as you mentioned with Civic Grove, if it looks like there's an issue that we can get done in that time, or maybe go over 10 minutes or so, that's okay. But if it looks like it's a whole new topic that's going to take an hour and a half, that we just
Are you willing to have more meetings?
Well, I think it's a trade-off. I think the example that we had last week, we had a meeting at Thursday at 10 in the morning. We'd never done that before. I thought that worked great. We were done at noon, and you had the rest of the day free. I'm willing to try it. I mean, nobody likes a lot of meetings, but on the other hand, nobody likes staying here till 11:30 or midnight either.
What I heard you say is you're proposing a 9:30 cutoff for all council meetings, special and regular.
Sure. I mean, open to discussion from everyone, get everyone's feedback.
Do you have any other comments before we?
Well, I'd just like to put that out there because it's, we've had several long meetings and it really is taxing on everyone who's involved. So
while the pointer's aimed at you, do you have any other comments?
No, I'm just throwing this out there for discussion.
Right. Go ahead, Jeff.
I have a couple comments before I get to Alessandro's idea. A couple of people talked about the production of the PowerPoints, and I just wanted to go back again to, I use these things. So I agree that the council should have them before the meeting. I find it, Chip and I have talked about this in the past. I find it frustrating to arrive at a meeting and find a PowerPoint presentation that I haven't seen.
Do you have any ideas on timing of that?
Well, I was thinking about that as I was hearing comments, and Nancy, I think, suggested Monday morning. And I think the problem with Monday morning is, speaking only for myself, the weekends are used to review the packet. And I need an opportunity to express my feelings to staff, and I'd like to have that opportunity before the PowerPoint presentation is presented. Like I was talking about before, sometimes I think my questions are important and might be of general interest to council members. So Monday morning doesn't work for me.
So Friday morning?
What?
Friday morning? Friday at noon? If not Monday, what day would work for you?
So the thing that works for me is, and again, this is only me, would be Tuesday at noon. Like I'm of the view that 4 hours is enough for me. So if I'm versed in the packet from the weekend, 4 hours for me, and I've already, as a lot of people know, like don't call me on Tuesdays, meeting Tuesdays. And
what about Monday meeting?
And so 4 hours for me is fine to get through the PowerPoint presentations and make notes on the PowerPoint presentation slides. If things haven't been cleared up or whatever, I'm responding to something that some other council member said or some member of the public emailed in. And it gives staff an opportunity to put the PowerPoint presentation together with all that stuff. I know, I'm fortunate or unfortunate that my meeting with Chip, where I can do all this stuff, is Mondays at 1:30, so I have the opportunity to ask my questions at my meeting, and I can't speak for the other 4 of you. I don't know when your meetings are, and I don't know whether a Tuesday at noon cutoff is good for you or bad for you or whatever it is, Tuesday production of the packet. So that's just me. Mondays, I guess the Monday meetings would have to be a little different. I don't know how to square that circle. Like, I don't know. If we talk a lot about having, we don't talk a lot about it, but it's been talked about before about having discussion items such as this one on Mondays. And I guess I would have to be prepared to, if I have questions on today's items, I would have to be prepared to send an email to staff on, by Sunday night and hope that they can have the PowerPoint presentation produced by noon on Monday. So for me, noon on Monday and noon on Tuesday would work. I don't know if there's a better idea.
Okay.
There have been a couple comments that, Cindy Lloyd, and I know, let's see if Cindy's still online. Cindy is still online, so I'll try not to be too mean to Cindy. Cindy Lloyd mentioned that the number of people is not indicative, and sometimes the number of people is indicative. And I think that's important. And the number of people, and the perfect example of this is street addresses, where we have literally talked about having a ballot measure, which is counting the number of people. And I don't know that, having the number of people in the room or in public comment speak, I don't know whether that's the right way to gauge public comment. Like, I don't have an idea. I don't know what the perfect way to gauge the number of people is, but these people showed up. Like, when we have when we have the meeting tomorrow on addresses and 30 people show up, that's 30 little dash marks I can make on my piece of paper, or however it is that we all count those things. And maybe it's not perfect. It's sure that it's not perfect, but the reality is that it's better than nothing. And sometimes that's how political movements work, getting people to show up. I mean, that's an American way of, influencing government. And for lack of anything better, I would say that, sometimes it is the number of people speaking. And I wish they didn't all take 3 minutes. But I think that's part of it. And then Alessandra spoke about curfew times, and that occasionally comes. There was one other thing. Someone talked about having times on meetings. Way back when I first joined the council and we were talking about beach fires, there was a beach fire meeting where on the agenda it said this item will begin soon after 6 o'clock. And so we went down the agenda, and when we got to 6 o'clock, we finished the item, and then the beach fire item started. And I think if we're having an issue like addresses, for example, when you don't necessarily need people to show up at 4:30, you don't want all the address folks to show up at 4:30 and have to sit through public comment and the extraordinary business, although that stuff is good for everybody, of course. I think that you can sort of sidebar one of these items every meeting and say this item isn't going to start until 6. We'll start as soon as possible, as soon as is practical after 6 o'clock. So we'll just work our way. We might, for example, work our way down the agenda, and then when 6 o'clock comes, we finish what we're working on, and we take a detour and we do addresses. And I think that would, sometimes when we have meetings, we have a big ticket item, and there are 30 people in the room to do that. And I think something like that might help to effectively manage that, and not have addresses wait until 8 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night. Like, we're going to do it at 6 and everybody can go home. So that's one way.
If I could clarify, just to make sure I understand what you're saying. So if the meeting's dragging on a little bit, even early on, and we get to 6 o'clock, no matter where we are with that discussion point, we table it, we move to the next subject.
That would be, I think that what I was saying was that we would finish whatever we're working on, and then as soon as possible after 6. So if we're talking about, if we're having this agenda item, and we said addresses will start after 6 o'clock, we'll start it at 5 minutes to 7 and 10 minutes when we finish this one. I wouldn't.
So you might push off another item and go to that one. You don't.
Yeah, whatever's next would be sequestered until we finished addresses.
Automatically.
And I think that's your discretion.
It's really our discretion, because I can suggest it and we can say
you run the meeting. So to some extent,
I think I would always get concurrence from you. I think that we're going to do.
Do you remember this, Chip, when we did? It was so long ago. I think the agenda actually said this item will not start before 6 o'clock. And, there were a lot of people that had, there was a lot of interest from the community with people with children, and they were trying to get their children fed, and they can't, you can't deal with your kids at 4:30, and so we're going to start after 6. And that's how, I can't remember exactly how it was worded on the agenda, but that was definitely a thing that we did at least once, and maybe more often than that.
One of the benefits of having Brian.
I hear Brian.
Yeah.
I was going to say I've seen other cities do that. There'll be a time specific. They'll finish the item that they're on when it hits that time, and then as soon as that item's done, they start the item with the specific time.
So that's something to think about when we have big ticket items that we think a lot of people are going to show up for. And then Alessandra talked about curfews, and I'll know a couple of things. One, at least what I've seen, cities have votes on curfews, so it's not a mandatory 9:30. And the Planning Commission might do this too.
We're supposed to.
Come to think of it, I think I've seen it at a planning commission meeting. I think I've seen it at a planning commission meeting once, but I don't know how the process works in other cities. But at some point, PG might have one. At some point, you have to vote. You have to take a vote of the council as to whether they want to continue.
PG does have that rule,
and they vote.
Yes.
And how many votes does it take to continue?
A majority.
So it only takes 4 votes to continue. So, So it would only take us 3 votes. PG has 7 council members, so it would take 4. But it would take us 3 votes to continue. So I don't know if that's the right thing. But the alternative, the downside to this is, tomorrow we have address. So we have, public comment, and then we have extraordinary business, and then we have addresses, which may take, could take 90 minutes or 2 hours or however long that takes. And then we're 8 o'clock, and then we have 3 appeals. And as we saw today, some of those appeals have attorneys. And I would hate to be the city council that has someone show up for an appeal and sit through 4 hours of meeting with an attorney and with an architect and say, oh, just kidding, we're going to send you back, and you can come back, you can come back 3 days from now at 10 o'clock in the morning. I don't know how that process would work. Okay. That came up a little bit when we were taught, when we had that kerfluffle over the CEQA thing and attorneys scheduling time and stuff like that. And I'm sure Chip can tell you about, I don't know what staff goes through when they schedule these public hearings on matters like that. But it's more complicated than just the 5 of us just deciding what to do.
Okay.
And that's I think a real risk for us.
All right. Good comments. Hans?
So I think Nancy had a really good point on cutting down on some of the length of the items in the presentations at the top of the meeting, particularly for the general Tuesday meeting. That's kind of prime time, and I sort of view the meeting as a wasting asset. Like it's just, that's the prime time, and then it kind of gradually, people tune out. And so I think making those a little bit tighter would be good. I think in terms of the timing of the presentations being delivered to the council and to the public, I would love to try to just find a way to put it in the agenda packet. Then the public would have a chance to look at those details. I would have a chance to review those details and actually give it some meaningful thought. I mean, I think the idea that we would get that packet at like noon on Tuesday, to me, just strikes me as kind of crazy and unhelpful for us to give it a serious read. The other sort of related comment I have on that is, it sort of relates to the timing of meetings too. There are people out there who want to be engaged in the governance of the village, who work for a living, right? They got a job, and if you send something out to them, and I'm one of those people, and so if you send me something at noon on Tuesday, I just can't react to it, right? And similarly, like, I'm happy, like I signed up to do this, I'm happy to have a meeting at 10 in the morning, but we have to realize that we're cutting out a significant chunk of the community, and I think an important chunk of the community when we do that. And so, I think that sort of segues to my last comment about the cutoff time. In a way, we kind of can set our own cutoff time anyway, right? We can say, hey, we're going to push these items. I think there is some value to that, though, the concept of not trying to squeeze too much in, because people really do fade, and then the quality of the discussion goes down. I mean, personally, I would be in favor of having a third meeting. Maybe it's in the middle of the month or something, so that we could, have those discussions when people are actually awake. I would just hope that it could be at a time so that, folks that have a job can actually attend as well.
Okay. First off, I think on public comment and brevity, that's the right thing. And again, Dale, I look to you that I encourage you to always, especially when we appear to have a lot of speakers, to put some rules out there. My observation is that people that aren't used to giving public comments, who have 3 minutes, they will take the first minute to tell you what they're going to tell you. They'll take the second minute to tell it to you, and then they'll take the third minute to tell it to you a third time. And if you even just remind them of that, and so therefore you only have to say it once, a lot of times can be effective. So the more you could coach them ahead of time. And then the other, another idea is, if you agree with what has already been said, you can take 10 seconds if you would like to, and say, I agree with everything that person just said, and I don't need to say any more. That's okay. It's not, you don't have to take up your 3 minutes. You really can achieve a lot. And then what the AHA group invented, the flash, what was it? The flash mob. That was a well-organized group of public comment who did not, they specifically they almost wanted to gain favor with city council by not wasting city council's time. So ahead of time, 2 of them stood up and said something, and then they turned around and said, who else in here agrees with that? And 20 people stood up, and that conveyed a heck of a lot to me.
It was highly effective.
It was very effective. That's hard to tease out from your chair, but in terms of the earlier access to presentations, Jeff, I can't deal with Tuesday or Monday at noon. I'm kind of the opposite. I'm sort of like, I want people calling me on those days and know that they can. So for me, end of business Friday, absolutely. And if we could have it out with the packet, even better. I need those things. The presentations, they really do differ quite a bit from the staff reports, and I almost learn more from them, honestly, because they've been condensed. The staff person putting them together has had to take a different approach, a different communication approach, to making a PowerPoint instead of a Word document, and often that is a more effective presentation style. On the curfew, I mean, I think this comes down, I would rather, you've heard me 20 times on this, I would rather start meetings earlier than have them go later. And a really good strategy for having meetings end earlier is to start them earlier. And I would, at 10 o'clock, I like daytime meetings. As Hans, you've suggested, the average age of our citizens is 65 years old. I expect that the vast majority have an employment status of retired or semi-retired. And I'm not looking to cut out those that are not, but I think we have a very large piece of our population that would not be offended by earlier starts. That said, we don't have to do 10 a.m. How about 2 p.m.? And and when we put the agenda together, we can actually try to think about, okay, what's the demographic of who might be interested in this? Because I agree, there are certain topics where we really need people who can't get here till 6 o'clock, that we do it at 6 o'clock. I very much like the idea suggested of that for really important topics, we list a start time and we go to it as quickly as we can. Someone mentioned sequencing of the agenda. I've had this debate with Chip, and my view is you need to do the important stuff early, first, not let it go till late. And that doesn't necessarily mean, sometimes you might want to do it at 6 instead of 5, but you want to tease it out earlier. I don't agree with the approach of this is hard, so let's wait till everybody's tired, or goes home. That's a thing. I don't agree with that. We do spend a lot of time on the nonprofit of the month, on the high school update, and that's valuable time. And I know there's going to be pushback for people to say, well, that's a valuable piece of the meeting. But I'll just leave it there. On emails and reading emails, that's going to add a lot of time. My approach to this in the past is that any email received by a cutoff, that it's the job of either the city clerk or the staff person doing the presentation to acknowledge the receipt of emails. I've actually seen, never city council I was part of, but where they actually would even say, and there's 12 in favor and 14 not in favor. I don't like that just because that's an interpretation. But I think people need to know that their emails have been received and heard, but I don't, it's a slippery slope to start reading them for exactly what Chuck said. He writes 10-minute letters, and you have to allow it. So, to Karen's suggestion that the mayor pro tem take a role of sort of a longer-term role of helping manage the agenda by being more of the liaison with the rest of the city councilors. Karen, if that's how I understood it. I'm willing to do that. I think it's a very good idea if that's something you want, because I think right now that all goes through Chip, and there's no reason to stop that. But I'm happy to be an advocate for my fellow councilors in terms of shaping agenda, especially if we can get to this 3-month idea, this 3-month rolling thing. So I'll let you all decide on that. One idea, and this one is that for appeals, I think appeals are a great reason for a special meeting, and that can absolutely be a daytime meeting, assuming it works for all of us. Because typically appeals, especially of planning commission, those are often items that the vast majority of the public does not have an opinion on. It often comes down to neighbors and the applicant, and it's often just comes down to 2 or 3 neighbors, and we're kind of resolving something. So doing those late at night is wrong, and piling them into a regular meeting or even a nighttime special meeting, I don't think we have to do that. That would be a good candidate. So thank you.
Thank you. Another thing on the appeals is it's easy for people to send in written comments, and we'll get their comment without being here, and that happens a lot.
A lot.
Could I just add a couple things? I changed my mind. I decided I did want to make a few
Go
points. I'm keeping them very brief, I promise. I definitely agree with the comments I heard about shortening up the Tuesday meeting, the way we get it going. So I'm in support of that. I feel very strongly with Bob that PowerPoint really should come in Friday by 5 o'clock to give us the time to go over it on the weekend. I think getting it Tuesday at noon is... Our Tuesdays are chaotic being on council. There's a lot going on. You get phone calls, you're busy. You don't have time to sit down and go through a presentation that you haven't seen to be able to prepare yourself for it. So the earlier those can come in, Friday 5 o'clock, I think would be really, really great. And then just to add to the curfew thing, would we want to consider adding an additional council meeting on the third Tuesday of the month to deal with some of that excess, to make that fairer to people, Hans, for example. Maybe just put that in our discussion. That's it. Nice and short, right?
Chip, Brian, and I are feverishly taking notes. And we're going to get together and document all this. And we'll maybe even listen to the meeting again. Yes, one more?
Yeah.
Okay.
I wanted to say that I did really like Bob's comment about having the appeals of the special meeting, if that's okay. I think that's a pretty spectacular idea to do. In terms of the presentations, I'm completely okay with whatever the council decides, with one exception. I would like, what I would ask is that staff have leeway to add slides to the end of the presentation to accommodate comments that the 5 of us make to staff between, the time the agenda packet comes out and the time of the meeting. I think that's really important because information does surface. And, perhaps our convention could be that the, hey, there are 6 new slides at the end of this meeting based on comments I've heard from council members and the public.
Okay.
I think that stuff is pretty important.
All right. By the way, my meeting day is Thursday. Now you know.
Oh,
with Chip.
I'll add it to my. I'll add it to my calendar.
All right.
I'm by the way of, nobody's going to like this, but I'm of mixed feelings about having a Tuesday meeting in the middle of the month. Some of us sometimes we go on vacation and that just happens. The talk about curfews and the talk about earlier meetings, it might be worthwhile. Monterey does do an afternoon and an evening meeting on Tuesdays. And they do, I don't know how that works. I don't know how they decide what goes into the morning, what goes into the sort of 4 o'clock session. I don't even remember what time it starts. Is it 4? Yeah. What goes into the 4 o'clock session and what goes into the 7 o'clock session?
The consent and orders of council that are benign, but they're not benign enough to go on consent.
Yeah. And then
so
there's
dinner
closed sessions.
Sometimes closed session, no proper negotiations, but then they actually have a full dinner break. It's like 90 minutes.
Yeah, we have Monday meetings, so I don't know how that works out.
Maybe we want to try starting at 4 o'clock. Have you ever done that?
I don't think we've ever done it, Mayor, but we could certainly poll the council and we could do that. We'll be here.
Increment earlier. And I personally like the idea of putting a 9:30 or something early. Because it would force us in our agenda meetings to really think twice before we put too much on.
Yeah.
We still might go past 9:30 if we have to, but at least it makes us think the right way. All right, I'm going to open it up one more time. Nancy, Donna, anybody want to take one more stab at this before we wrap it up? All right, you had your chance. All right. I'm going to bring it back. I think that was excellent. I'm sort of sad that this went so long, but I'm also really happy that it went this long because we got some really good information out there, right, Brian?
Yeah, I think so. I did have one thing to add, Mayor,
Okay.
to make this meeting longer. Government Code Section 84308, the Levine Act, I did look it up, and it is $500 effective January 1 of 2025. So
change.
the law.
You were both right.
Okay, so we're going to write this up. We're going to write this up and come up with a strategy for bringing it back.
Yep, and again, when we bring it back, it'll just be in draft based on what we've heard. So it's not me and the mayor and Brian's dictate. It'll be for additional discussion.
Yeah, and keep the comments coming. This is just the beginning of this discussion. So thank you very much, everybody, for your great comments.
Yeah.
All right.
Can we take, Mr. Mayor, could we take a break?
Would everybody like to take a break?
Yeah.
Okay, we've got one more item and then a closed session.
Yeah, Marty, how long is your presentation?
About 30 minutes.
10 minutes? 3 minutes?
3.
Okay, yeah, we better take a break.
Yeah, we better take a break. All right.
She said 3.
3 minutes?
Sorry, it was a joke. 3 minutes.
3 minutes?
Yes.
Alessandra, you want to wait 5 minutes? Do you want?
I don't mind waiting.
You want to take a break? Okay, let's take a break. Let's take a 10-minute break. We'll come back. For those of us up here, we're going to be here anyway, so it doesn't matter. We're back at 7:15. Jeff. Somebody go hunt.
We're missing a few.
Bob just must.
We got a quorum. You want to start?
Huh? I'd gladly. No, I won't. Everybody here? Almost. We almost had it. Okay. How are you? Okay. All right, we're going to bring it back. Thank you for the break and sandwiches, Nova. We appreciate that. And for everybody else that's sticking it out here. Okay, we're now going to have item number 11, General Plan and Housing Element Annual Progress Reports for calendar year 2024. And I'm going to turn this over to Marnie. Hi, Marnie.
So this is going to be very brief. I don't have a PowerPoint for you this evening. So this item is our annual general plan progress report. It is something that we are required to submit to the state every year. It is due tomorrow, which is April 1st. And so we will make sure that it is uploaded to the state's website. It is for calendar year 2024, and it's a report on our activity implementing the general plan as well as our housing element for 2024. So staff's approach to this report is to go through all of our city council agendas for 2024, take a look at all the actions that the city council took and what general plan policies that those actions align with. And that comprises the general plan portion of the report. The housing element portion has forms that are specifically created by the Department of Housing and Community Development. So we are required to fill out their forms, which include building permit data and activity. So they track all of our housing applications from application submittal through occupancy. We record them all on their forms and then submit them back to them. And so that is what the reports are. The state law does require that we present these to the city council before submitting them to the state, which is what we're doing here this evening. That is my short presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
After that last discussion about short staff presentations, you really nailed it. I'll open up for questions. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor. I have a question about something that came up at the last week's meeting for the housing element with the AHA group. Are we going to have another council update? I mean, I can certainly wait to ask it then. Do you know, is there one coming up in May?
For the amendment?
Yeah.
You know what? I don't have the timeline with me this evening. Does anybody? Okay.
We have one coming. I will look up the exact date that we have planned, but we have a sequence of
coming to the Planning Commission, the City Council very soon with updates on where we're at with, policy writing and meetings with HCD, just to make sure you stay caught up on where we're at. And then eventually, sometime, in the summer, we're targeting coming to you with actual red lines and draft language. But we do intend to come to you with an update.
It's supposed to be mid-May.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just hold on to my question then. Okay, thanks.
Jeff, I'll let you chew. I'll let you finish your sandwich. I have a question. Could you describe how the filling in the forms process works compared to the great spreadsheet that you included in the staff report?
So the spreadsheets are the forms that have been created by the Housing and Community Development. So those are the forms that we actually enter the data in. There are formulas built in that do the calculations that HCD wants to see. So they're tracking, how many applications did we receive in 2024? And then they're looking to see how many building permits did we issue, because that's how they count our regional housing needs allocation. It's based on when the building permit for the housing unit was actually issued. So they've got all their formulas set up in those complicated Excel spreadsheets.
So that pretty multicolored spreadsheet that we looked at is the form?
It is.
Wow, it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you for putting that all together. It's a lot of work.
Just a lot of data entry.
It's data from a lot of places. It's coming from all over.
Yeah.
And, wow, thank you. Nice job.
Thanks.
Anybody else have a question? All right, public comments? Hang on there, Marnie, just in case. Step aside so Nancy has a place to speak.
I just want to thank Marnie and any of her supporting cast that makes all this stuff happen. It's impressive, and can't say it enough. She does great work personally, and I know she potentially pulls from some of the rest of the crew, so acknowledgement to all of the above. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Very nice of you. Donna? Nobody else?
Oh, we have a hand raised on Zoom.
Okay, good.
Maria, go ahead. Oops. Go ahead now.
Hi, this is Maria Roos, and I have 3 questions. Marnie, incredible report, incredible spreadsheet. I love to read through it, but I have 3 questions out of the spreadsheet. On the table A2, there's a section that identifies for ADUs an R for renter occupied or O for owner occupied. From the 22 that you've reported in this report, how many of those fall in each category? That's my first question.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead and ask your other ones and we'll answer them at the end.
Okay. The second question is table B, basically out of the 22, just to make sure I understand it, out of the 22, everything that has been built, it shows under above moderate, correct?
Correct.
That's the category in which they fall, the 22 that we're reporting for ADUs? That's the second question.
Okay.
Okay, and my third question is, in the table D on the program 11B, basically the city-owned sites, there's a report specific to Sunset Center sites 1 and 2, and there's an implementation plan being developed by the team by later this year. How do you see that coming forward versus comparing that to what we have in the budget for Sunset Center? Because it seems to me that if this is something that's going to go forward, we should probably not spend any money in the Sunset Center. It will be my approach. So I wanted to see where we stand in that preparation of that documentation. That's my third question. And that's all my questions.
Okay. Okay, so on table A2, we did list all of the ADUs as being renter occupied. That is an assumption. We don't know for sure if they will be owner occupied or renter occupied. So that is just an assumption. On table B, they are all credited as market rate or above moderate units. So none of them are being counted as lower income units. And in Table D, for our status on the city-owned sites on Program 1.1.B, as in boy, for calendar year 2024, we simply are reporting that it's ongoing because the amendment work is ongoing. So that's where we're at with that one.
And the implementation of the development standards for the Sunset Center, is that being worked on right now because it's to be delivered by the end of the year?
It is not being worked on right now.
It is not?
No. The request for proposals that is out right now for the objective design and development standards is for multifamily projects in the downtown.
Okay, okay, get it. Okay, thank you so much. Very much appreciate all the work that's being done.
Okay, I'm going to bring it back. Anybody have a comment?
I move to approve the resolution.
I have a comment before we do that, but I like your attitude. Moving things along. I think you had something, Hans.
I'm sorry, Hans.
No, my comment, I guess, goes contrary to that a little bit. I do feel like this is an example of, to the conversation we had earlier, where like a short presentation here would probably be helpful. Like,
yes.
How many housing units did we produce last year? How many ADUs did we produce last year, right? Like, how many of those housing units were affordable? Like, I think that would be helpful information for the public to see.
I agree. It was a very interesting report. And maybe we can do that at a future meeting in the near future, because it would be short, maybe 10 minutes. But I think the information would be useful.
I remember seeing it last year. But
okay. In terms of the process, like, you turn this in, and then they say, "Nice job, Marnie." What happens?
Nothing. They sort of check the box. Yeah, and that's about it.
Do they ever come back and say, "That's not good enough," or "I have questions"?
No. We stopped getting reminder emails.
You get those?
We do.
Okay.
We get lots of them.
It's just nice to understand your world and what it looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So after all...
So far, yeah, nothing...
So nothing said is good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Thank you again, Marnie, and we appreciate you and your team and everything you're doing in and amongst all kinds of things that you're involved with.
And Brandon mentioned when we come back with the update on the amendment, we'll make sure that we include an update on the numbers as well for 2024.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We've done the public comment. Do we have a motion? It's time for your motion now.
You already have a motion.
We have a motion? Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Any more comments?
Yeah, could I just ask a question? That's a motion to approve the recommendations in the agenda report?
Thank you for that clarification. Absolutely.
Okay.
Is that good enough?
Yes.
Adopt the resolution and
yeah, there was
direct staff to submit them to OPR.
Yeah, they can submit that report.
Okay.
All right. We had a second, I think, from Jeff. Okay. And take a roll call.
Okay. Councilmember Barron?
Yes.
Councilmember Buder?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Delves?
Yes.
Councilmember Dramoff?
Yes.
Mayor Byrd?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. Did you have something to say, Brian?
Well, only I'm ready to make the announcements for the closed session when you are.
Yes. Do you want to make it?
Sure.
Okay.
We're going to have two closed sessions this evening. They're both conference with labor negotiators. They're authorized by Government Code Section 54957.6. The agency designated representatives are designated in the agenda. One of the closed sessions is regarding the employee organization, the Carmel Fire Ambulance Association, and the other employee organization for the other closed session is the Police Officers Association, goes by the acronym of POA.
All right. And before we go into closed session, do we have any public comments or questions on those? Seeing none, we will adjourn the public meeting and we'll be going into closed session. Thank you everyone for your participation today, and we hope to see you at our regular meeting tomorrow at 4:30.